Welcome to episode 197 of the XS Noize Podcast, where we focus on in-depth interviews with musicians, artists, and people involved in the music industry. I'm your host, Mark Millar. Thanks for listening. In this episode, I speak to Wendy James about her new album, The Shape of History. If you missed the previous episode, I spoke to Gavin Friday about his new solo album, Ecce Homo. So check it out, and if you like the podcast, please subscribe in your favourite listening platform, give us a rating, and leave a comment. English singer-songwriter Wendy James burst onto the British music scene in 1988 as the bold and dynamic frontwoman of the chart-topping alternative rock band Transvision Vamp. On October 25th, Wendy is set to release her highly anticipated new album, The Shape of History. Written, produced and mixed by James herself, the album was recorded between West London and New York City, showcasing her continued evolution as an artist. In this episode, Wendy talks about writing and recording the album, Transvision Vamp, her upcoming in-store tour, and lots more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the XS Noize Podcast with Wendy James. So hi Wendy, welcome back to the XS Noize Podcast. You might not remember this, but you were my first ever guest on the podcast. It's great to have you back. It's been 4 years since I spoke to you about Queen High Street, and soon you will release your brilliant 10th album, The Shape of History. Mm-hmm. Now, The Shape of History sounds like a deeply introspective and powerful title. What inspired the concept behind the album, and how did you come up with the title?
Well, the title I had is that I always have these titles, like I had with Queen High Street. I have them as titles for songs. But then as the evolution of all the songwriting works itself through, you know, you're not forcing yourself to find an album title, but you're kind of cogitating on what sums up the whole thing. And obviously it's a 10th album. That's a solid round number. It's to be honest, it's 36 years. Or is it 38 actually? We literally began in 86. So that makes 38 years, doesn't it? So you can, if you want to, study me and my music. You can see an arc going through life. Different stages, different places, different locations, different subject matter, There's always a thread of consistency, I think, with my music, which is the fact that I go, you know, my choice nitty gritty is the downtown mid-70s CBGB, Max's Kansas City, Stooges, Velvets, New York Dolls. That's my comfort zone. But you also know from my songwriting now that I do veer off into discoveries of other types of music, whether it's a country ballad or a grungy grime or a speed kraut rock. You know, I'm prepared to go there because I find that songs do connect at some level in their anthropology of how they came to be. You know, you wouldn't have Blondie if it were not for 50s bebop. You know, you can go back and do your archaeology and see how everything made everything. From rhythm and blues, from spirituals, from African American spirituals. And to some degree in Britain, marching bands and skiffle, you know, it all plays into what we end up with today.
You do explore, as you said, lots of different genres in there. You know, there's grunge, there's electro pop. You know, what I love about the album is it's very melodic.
Right, I am a melody person. And I'm also a humongous backing vocal person. Whether it's Bacharach and David or whether it's Frankie Valli, or all Motown. I'm an enormous fan. And quite staggered sometimes. I was listening to Gladys Knight and the Pips. You know, all the Temptations or any of those soul bands of the 60s, 70s. The way they weave the backing vocals in is quite extraordinary. You know, they're whole other parts. And maybe when you're a beginner songwriter, you just do harmonies, which is nice. But when you're a more evolved songwriter, you can actually compose whole other parts, which are the backing vocal parts, and they become their own thing. And sometimes they become almost to sound like they're the lead vocal. And I noticed that with Frankie Valli, and I noticed that with Motown. And so that's one, yes, I'm a melody person. God, I'm going on today. But yes, melody is one of my main driving things.
Yeah, you've always been known for your punk rock attitude and rebellious spirit. And this album really reflects your evolution as an artist over the years, I think.
Good. Yeah, well, I mean, it has. Yeah, okay. Tell me. I'll respond to what you're saying. What do you think? Tell me why you think that.
Going back from the beginning, from Transvision Vamp to all your solos, working even with Elvis Costello and then the Racine projects, and then all your solo works. When you started developing as a songwriter after Elvis Costello, and then you started writing your own stuff, you can just see the evolution, and I think it just culminates in this album.
Yeah, I think so too. And like I said, it's one. There is a consistency there because there's always a through line through all my albums. You're always going to get a certain amount of new wave or no wave punk pop in there. But you also, I do go, I love Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And I love a little bit of Willie Nelson. I love a bit of Johnny Cash. I love a bit of fucking Einstürzende Neubauten. At some point, if it's good, it joins and it connects. Like what I've told you probably in the past through the heyday of my New York years. And this was already primed in me, even from the Transvision Vamp days, when we were a bit humongous pop band. But at the same time, on the East Coast of America, Public Enemy was creating an enormous stir and culture change, along with Spike Lee and Do the Right Thing and Public Enemy's albums and Hank Shockley's production, plus De La Soul. Hip hop really, really started to become the new Bob Dylan for us because of the way they were telling their tales of their lived experience, to borrow a phrase, and the kind of rough NWA, the rough street sounds that reflected where they were coming from, which is no different to Bob Dylan singing about, the West Village and his struggles coming from middle America into the West Village to try and make it as a poor country singer into the thing that he became, the icon he became. And so hip hop's always been there. And actually, it became the most revolutionary force in music because while white rock and roll bands, you'd have drums, bass, keyboards, guitar, second guitar, maybe a bit of instrumentation on top of that. It was formulaic. Whereas hip hop suddenly they were blowing up the sub bass and blowing up all the sounds and using all these classic soul samples and making music that just made you stride down the street like you were Superfly. So hip hop was an enormous influence toward the end of Transvision Vamp. And for me, certainly when I moved to New York and I just went gangbusters for Jay-Z and Nas and the Black Album and Mos Def. And, I just got totally into it. I mean, I do love my New York. And New York can be Gangs of New York. It can be Daniel Day-Lewis and it can be fucking not Tupac, sorry, that's West Coast, but it can be Nas. And so it's just, there's something about that city that embodies poetry and a really good aggressive attitude.
And some of this album was recorded in New York, isn't that right?
I went there for the keyboards. I went, so the track, it's just the same as my life. The main tracking was done in West London, Scrubs Lane, which is where I hail from. Then the keyboards were picked up in Brooklyn, New York, and I stayed down at Battery Park, which is the beginning of New York, where the first settlers arrived, which is just really amazing. And because I have I call New York my primary address, but also now I'm spending a bit more time in Europe. So I went back to New York for the keyboards, and then I doubled back on myself and went back to California to mix with Jesse Nichols, who'd done The Price of the Ticket with myself and Williamson and Lenny Kaye. And so I mixed in Oakland, California, which, California is such a different thing to, well, I sound like a travelogue, but it's just, there's another vibe altogether. And I was actually telling a different journalist, back in the day, Transvision Vamp actually broke out of California, not New York, because we were signed to Universal Records. And that was part of the big Universal Studios, corporation, which was up in the Hollywood Hills. So we actually did our first gigs and our first media across America out of California. We played at the Roxy on Sunset Boulevard. Jack Nicholson was there. Shelley Duvall was there. I guess they were still BFFs from The Shining. They came down to the gig. And we broke out of California.
And who else did you collaborate with on this album? And how did those collaborations shape the final sound?
Well, this album is a repeat offenders list, because everyone that's on this album has already been with me on previous albums. So as you probably know, James Sclavunos, the drummer most known for Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, although he's done many other things. He's been with me for nearly a decade now. He's been with me since The Price of the Ticket. He's on drums and percussion. Harry Bohe is the genius bass player who also played on Queen High Straight. Alex Ward is the guitarist / keyboard player who also played on Queen High Straight and plays live with me. Dave the Moose Sherman is on keyboards and piano, and he's who I went to Brooklyn to record with. And he comes via Sclavunos and via Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. He was one of their keyboard players for a while. And then a guest spot for Louis Elliott, who is an old West London, someone I know from West London who is primarily known for rhythm guitarist for Grace Jones. So all sorts of people that I've worked with, and the same thing with the engineers. I work on this album, it's all same engineers I've worked with. So there was never any having to go through the teething stage of having to get to know new people and see if you work out with them or not. All these people know me and I know them, and we know how to hit the road running with all the shortcuts.
Well, let's talk about some of the songs. I love the opening track, Sweet Like Love. And again, it's, as I mentioned, it's very melodic. And I love the lyric, back in the beginning of something again. Well, that's meant to happen, always does. For I have learned in this beautiful world of ours, all things are possible.
And then later on in the song, it says, for I have learned that some things are impossible. It's my little opening. If I were Leonard Bernstein, I would be doing Rhapsody in Blue across the Manhattan skyline. It's my overture into my movie. And we have, there are harps and there are strings, but it's not a fully blown orchestra. And it's what do they call it in business meetings? A mission statement. It's back in the beginning of something again, which is literally how it is when you settle down, sit on this very sofa here, pick up the guitar and begin writing a new album. You're back at the very beginning of something again.
And then there's that, which is very melodic. And then there's the electro pop of the debut single from the album, Freedomsville. There's just a lot to pick out in the album. What can you tell me about that? And why did you decide to put that track out first? Did you want to throw people off a bit?
A couple of people have questioned that. I mean, first of all, I love the Freedomsville bit of the song, Freedomsville. So I really love the musicality of Freedomsville. But the reason I wrote it is because, every now and then you get told to go and have a look at a clip that's surfaced itself on YouTube. And there was live footage of Transvision Vamp playing in Hamburg. And I'm guessing in 1989, because it's part of the tour where we opened with the song Trash City. Transvision Vamp were one of the originators of that sequenced sound that, was given to us by Blade Runner and by Ridley Scott and by Giorgio Moroder, and Vangelis, I suppose. But, the heavy cinematic sequencing. But Transvision Vamp and Zig Zig Sputnik kind of harnessed that into a rock and roll way of presenting it. And so I was watching Trash City, and it was just so fucking thunderous. The way that all the sequences would come in and the audience went mad and it was pounding. So I wanted to do that, especially seeing as I was there. It was mine. It was me that did it. But also at the same time, I'm a huge Europhile when it comes to kind of dark wave movies. And I was watching Roman Polanski movies, particularly one called Frantic, which I think it's Jean-Michel Jarre, but he's also through a European prism lens. He's also using sequences and orchestral stabs and arrangements, but in a kind of more less commercial way, in a more dark way. And then on top of that, I caught myself looking at a fashion show by the couture designer Saint Laurent, and he was also, and actually sometimes these runway music are really, really inventive. And he was employing somebody who'd been part of the Headbanger group. I don't know if you remember them. And about 6 years ago, they kind of made like Air was massive, and underneath that there was a counterculture of, and these guys were called Headbanger. Anyway, he's employed one of them called Sebastian, who makes this I mean, if you don't need to look at the clothes, but just close your eyes and listen to the music. It's like a movie score of a futuristic dark wave cinemascope. I don't know how to, and so I just wanted to combine all those things. And I went to James Sclavunos, and and he's got a computer full of all the banks of different sequence sounds. And we had a dig into those. And it actually occurred to me that they all sound really, really cliche because they've all been used on even, margarine adverts by now. You pick up a bit of string and you pick up a stab here and a sequencer there. So in the end, everything on Freedomsville is actually played analog. That's all of us playing perfectly in time for 5.5 minutes, but layered and layered and layered and layered. And the reason it's the first single is because my super gay photographer in Rome, who likes to pound it out on the dance floor, said, "You got to give us some dance music." So it was him that said, "I love Freedomsville. Let's go with Freedomsville." So it wasn't a deeply thought out choice. It was just because Doddy said he liked it.
Yeah, it's a great track. Great track.
Thank you.
The crack and the boom of the creeps and the goons. I love the guitar riffs and your voice, sort of the effects on your voice.
So that's more like a look back at, the scrapes potentially, or the pitfalls potentially. I'm not saying I ever fell into them, but potentially. And it's not just music, but the movie business or anything that's purported to be glamorous. There's an underbelly there that can get a little bit tawdry, a little bit nasty. And if you're not tough, you can get sucked under. It's not for the weak. And so the crack and the boom of the creeps and the goons is, at the end of the day, no matter how much evolution we humans have made, it's a little ass here and a little tits there. And, people go for... It also reminded me of when I was in Tokyo years ago. Which period was I in Tokyo? I was flown to Tokyo to record with an enormous Japanese/Korean pop star. He had done the theme for Kill Bill for Quentin Tarantino. And he was very well connected because he was so famous. And he showed me some of is it Yakuza? I don't want to speak out of turn, but the Yakuza strip clubs, the ones that white people can't get into. And we went into these strip joints, but on the pole were all Canadian and American blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls sliding down the pole. And it just, there's still a road to be trod in equality. So there is an underbelly to show business. It's an old joke. You start going off on your audition and you end up in porn. So, you have to be tough.
Step Aside Roadkill.
It's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites because the production is just so mammoth on all the riffs. But then in the middle, as I was explaining to all my engineers as we recorded and then mixed, the middle section I used to call my Carly Simon section, because you've got all this heavy blues riffing.
The piano section?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a piano section, a middle eight,
Yeah.
and it just suddenly it goes off into, you know, Carly, where she's singing "You're So Vain" in Nantucket, in the Bay area of Nantucket, that famous video. It goes off into Carly Simon. I would call it the Carly Simon. That's how I identified it. But it's a heavy blues dirge with a bit of Carly Simon thrown in.
And we must mention the new single, Do You Dig It? Do You Love It? Is it groovy?
Which I'm about to release the video for this Friday when it comes out. And the video is all unseen footage of Transvision Vamp on the road, 1988 to 91, or even 86 perhaps. Yes, there's some early stuff there as well. So myself and the photographer, David Lee Dodd, who's also my video maker, he and I have been compiling the footage, and I'll have the final cut tonight, this evening, actually. And so when Transvision Vamp were on the road, we all had original Super 8 cameras, and it was our job to just, you know, if it was a funny climbing on the tour bus, arriving somewhere, being bored at an airport, or of course setting up the cameras on the stages so we could see the massive audiences we were playing to. So all this footage is fully baked and digitized and in my possession now, and probably some kind of long form doc at some point. But for now, it's a really delicious video to accompany Do You Dig It? Do You Love It? Is It Groovy? Which is a proper, you know, I told you, I always offer up a couple of proper punk pop songs, and this is one of the ones on this album.
You know, it's great that you seem to be very proud of your Transvision Vamp days. The way bands are reforming these days, do you always get asked to reform?
Sporadically, but I mean, I don't really take it seriously because I know the people involved, and whilst I'm still a very active participant of the music business and as a working musician, the others aren't. And so you'd have to really oil those joints and creak up that, you know, that machine to get it anywhere near being match fit, competitive. Because personally, I'm not that interested in seeing old, fat, bald people playing stuff they played really great 30 years ago. I'm not saying they're old, and well, they are, but I don't know if they're bald, and I don't know if they're fat, and it doesn't matter if they are. But there's just something to be said. You know, it just worked out because Joe Strummer died that the Clash never did reform, and that, you know, they're forever young, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're forever gorgeous and fucking vital. And in our own way, Transvision Vamp remains that figment of brilliance for when it existed.
but you will be going on tour yourself in support of this album. So what can fans expect from the live performances, and where will you be touring?
Well, thank you. So yes, I've done in-store shows before at Rough Trade East. I know you know that that's a big record store in East London, in Truman Brewery, and they're set up for really lovely gigs there. And so I was going to do Rough Trade East as an entree. And then the person, well, I know the Rough Trade guys, they have 4 stores in the UK now, 1 in Berlin and 1 in New York. So that piqued my interest. So, okay, well then let's do all of those. And then I just expanded it out, and I said to the lady who helps distribute my music, well, hang on, are there other record stores around the UK that have a stage set up and a couple of amps and are prepared to put on little live shows? And so we've managed to compile 16 of them, which is mad, back to back, no days off. And I have to say I'm going to do it, but I'm a bit surprised I don't have a day off. But it's my own fault. So I'm going to go around the UK, and it doesn't include getting to Ireland, but it does include getting to Scotland and Wales. And it starts in Newcastle, and we work our way through the country. And I'll be doing... I looked at the set list yesterday because myself and Alex are starting to learn it now. It's 55-minute long set list. It includes quite 6 or 7 numbers from the new album, and then a couple from each of all my other 9 albums. and I'm going to sing that in a White Stripes type of way. We stripped it back to some filthy guitar, a voice, and a bit of keyboard. Obviously, White Stripes is drums, but by that I mean just the two of us, but still very heavy, still very electric. And then also throw open the audience. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty spontaneous. Throw open the audience and see what people want to ask. And that I've never done this before. So it's an opportunity. I know that my fans are really loyal. I know that they really appreciate the consistency. And so if there's something if they want to tell me about the time that their mum bought them pop art, or if they want to tell me about the time that they came out to one of my songs, or any memory they want to share or ask me a question, let's have a funny bit of banter. And then, as I always do at the shows, meet at the merch table, click, do some photos, meet, and sign whatever you buy there. But, so it should be a 2.5, 3 hour, spectacle. And then next year, I have no plans, but there will be something.
As mentioned, you've released 9 albums prior to The Shape of History. The first 3 with Transvision Vamp, and then there was 2 with your Racine project, and the rest solo albums. So, can you tell me briefly what comes in first into your mind when I mention certain albums? So we'll start off with Little Magnets.
If Looks Could Kill. Dr. John. New Orleans. Dr. John. Voodoo. Heavy voodoo American music. And probably some of our finest songs. If Looks Could Kill is a great great song.
What was it like navigating in the time in Transvision Vamp? What was it like navigating fame at such a young age? Were there any moments where you felt particularly challenged by the attention?
Well, not really, because I really did have a gang. I had my band around me. I'm from West London. West London's not unused to famous people living there. They don't really make a fuss they don't make a fuss over you. You still walk to the grocery store like any other person. Much like New York, actually, it's just not a thing. And so for all the maelstrom that was going on in the media, my life remained pretty much the same. We weren't earning loads. Just because you're on top of pops doesn't mean you're rich immediately. So we weren't earning loads of money. We were still going down to the Warwick Castle, which, by the way, was the same pub that Joe Strummer and Paul Simonon were still in. So there's I guess there is a type of person who wants to be famous and wants to have an entourage and wants to have the limousine life. And, and there's a certain type of musician, actually, or even actor, because I think Robert De Niro is pretty down to earth as well. There's a certain type of famous person that just doesn't care about any of that stuff and likes to still go to the pub for a fucking pint. And so our lives actually didn't change. And we became increasingly busy, and we were always at Heathrow Airport, and we were always flying in and out to do European or American stuff, plus all the UK stuff. But at the end of it, we didn't have, assistants and entourages. We'd dump our bags and go down the pub. So actually things weren't that. And whatever anyone was reading in the press was generated by the press for the press. They like, even worse now, they love fear and shock and awe and scandal every 2 minutes. And that kind of culture was coming in, during my time. But my time is still pre-internet. So actually the lives we lived weren't that impacted by, I suppose if you'd done a real study on what people were thinking about me based on what they were reading about, would have been entirely different perhaps to the actual life I was living, which was still with my same friends, still in the pub, except we were really, really busy.
And we must mention, Now Ain't the Time for Your Tears, your collaboration with Elvis Costello, which I think I read recently you didn't enjoy singing the lyrics. Is that right?
It's not that I didn't enjoy it. It's just that halfway through, At the very beginning, it was like, oh my God, Elvis has written me an album. This is so incredible. Which it is. Him and Kate Riordan from the Pogues had written this album. But as I got into the recording studio, and I don't think Elvis could deny this, it's pretty bitchy. It's a little bit nasty. And he's writing an album about a person he doesn't know, i.e. me, who he perceives to be, which ties into your last question and the press and everything, who he perceives to be another young, blonde, idiot pop star. And he wrote lyrics in that vein. And then I had to sing about myself in that vein. And as much as the songwriting, maybe it was strong, maybe it was good, that's up to you to decide. The content of the lyrics were pretty fucking nasty. And so somewhere through it, it's not like I said, okay, I'm not doing this. I did finish the album. But somewhere halfway through, I thought, he's not being that nice about me. And I don't know, is it a clever move in life to slag yourself off? And so whilst I finished the album, and I'm so grateful for it in many ways, i.e. there was Transvision Vamp, and then there was Elvis, and then there was me. So Elvis was a really important conduit, really important bridge from A to B and the rest of my life. It wasn't necessarily... It's an interesting thing to get somebody to sing about themselves in a derogative way, which he managed to do. And that's not to say the songs are bad. I know that he's released all of them now as B-sides or novelties. He calls them the Gwendolyn letters.
Right.
I'm Wendy, and I wrote him the letter asking him to do this. But the most important thing Elvis contributed to my life was the fact that he made me call time on singing other people's words. And he made me say, okay, by hook or by crook, I already owned a guitar. I just hadn't really played it. I hadn't mastered it. I'm going to write my own words and my own melodies and my own feelings. And whatever happens, that's what it's going to be. And in my opinion, that's turned out very much for the better.
And it started with Racine 1 and 2?
Yeah, exactly.
If people want to understand the music of Wendy James, what are the 5 songs they should listen to?
Stoned, Ripped and Twisted, which I think is Racine 2, is it? You'll have to fact check me. Stoned, Ripped and Twisted. Speedball, which I think is I Came Here to Blow Minds. I mean, I don't know what to choose from Queen High Straight because they're all so good, if I say so myself. These Beggar Memories, which I also think is from I Came Here to Blow Minds. Oh, really? Only 5?
Well, you can name more if you want.
But if you want to know me, so I'm looking for meaning in the songs. Oh God. Well, you tell me, but is that Racing 2? Grease Monkey. I'm going to play Grease Monkey out on this upcoming tour. And that's the first song I ever wrote for Racine number 1. And I wrote that song in the style of kind of Blondie, Denny, and at the time, here's something I've never told anyone. At the time, my boyfriend was Mick Jones from The Clash. And if you listen to Grease Monkey, it goes, baby, 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 I got to get to you, da, 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 da. And there's a descending little pattern. And it was Mick that said, do that, put a dissension in there. So it was Mick that came up with that idea. Well, he was also there when we did I Want Your Love as well, by the way.
Really?
When we did the demos, when Nick Sayer and I were demoing I Want Your Love, Mick and I were already a thing. And we hadn't constructed the whole chorus for I Want Your Love. And I remember playing it on a stereo system in Colville Terrace in Ladbroke Grove to Mick, and him going, And I also remember him when we did Baby I Don't Care, and he's like, you've managed to use the Louie Louie riff, because that's the god of all riffs, right? Ba 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 ba. And Mick was well gelled that we'd managed to use that riff. But anyway, and another song that I think I really like, Thank You for the Time We Shared, on this new album. I really love when it goes into the 3/3 waltz time signature at the end. It reminds me of the Annie musical, It's a Hard Knock Life for You, It's a Hard Knock. So there's all sorts of, oh God, I could really go on about all my songs and where they come from and all my imagination.
Well, looking beyond the shape of history, are there any upcoming projects or future directions you're excited to explore?
Well, one thing I've kind of thought in the last 24 hours, because Alex, my guitarist and keyboard player, he's put together the arrangements that he thinks we should basically adhere to for this unplugged in-store tour. And it's so Johnny Cash, it's fucking crazy. So I've actually asked David Lee Dodd, to come to England, because he lives in Rome, and film this, because I think we might be able to get a 30-minute unplugged documentary out of this. Because it's just, because usually when I'm playing with my band, they're a 6-piece band, it sounds massive. I have to scream on top of them. But this, you're just going to hear all the intonation of my voice, plus Alex's filthy guitar. Like when Johnny went and played Folsom Prison. I think I might be able to get some unplugged footage out of this upcoming tour. And then next year, obviously, the dream is to get onto some festivals, get onto a big tour, and go around the world. Bring the good word to everyone.
Sounds good. I will be excited to hear that unplugged project.
And I must get to Ireland, as you say.
Yes. Belfast, Dublin.
Yeah, it's a long time coming. Ireland was the first place Transvision Vamp ever went to, outside of, after we'd done all of our UK uni tour, we did the most massive Irish tour. I mean, we played all across Ireland, in all the pubs. It wasn't just a couple of major cities. We went and played everywhere. So I do owe that. But I'm a self-funder. Everything I make through the web store is what pays for everything.
Yeah.
So I either can or I can't. It really is that simple.
Just a few more questions, Wendy. I like to ask my guests the following questions.
Okay.
For us music fans, music is the soundtrack to our memories. What song or album, when you listen to it, brings back the best memories for you?
When I was a youth.
Yeah.
I know a song to tell you.
Cool.
And I'd forgotten all about it until the other day. The Jam doing the cover version of Big Bird by, fact check me, he's an old soul guy, can't remember his name, please do the research and correct me.
Yeah, I don't know it offhand.
I went to all of the farewell gigs at Wembley Stadium of the Jam, and I was down in the tube station at midnight, and everyone was singing Barmy Jam, Barmy Army down in the tube station. It was glorious. But Big Bird is shall I Google it while we're talking?
Yeah.
It's a soul. Okay, I'll try and talk and Google at the same time. Anyway, Paul played this at Big Bird, the Jam, at all the farewell shows. And it's by, who's it by? Original. Let me put in original. Oh my God. Eddie Floyd. There is a soul artist called Eddie Floyd. He wrote this amazing song called Big Bird, and Paul Weller and the Jam covered it. That's one of my earliest memories, as being a kid in my girly bedroom, dancing, because I was into my northern soul, and I grew up some of my time on the south coast of Britain, where mods and rockers have a history, and you'd go to discos and like southern versions of northern soul. And plus that played into two-tone and the ska movement. And I just remembered freaking out to Paul Weller's version of Big Bird by Eddie Floyd. So that's one of them.
Let's check that out.
You listen to it when we hang up. You'll play it 10 times in a row. Quadrophenia.
Classic.
Out of My Brain, On the Train, 550. Jimmy. Love that. Actually, I also really liked Pinball Wizard, and I guess I really like The Who. I guess I was a bit of a mod, but I wasn't a mod. I was a pre-punk. I was a two-tone ska person. I went to see Funboy 3. I went to see Bananarama with Funboy 3 when I was a teenager. I went to see The Clash when I was a teenager. Okay, well, here's a different track, Peter and the Wolf, the soundtrack to Peter and the Wolf. I remember being in my parents' attic with a little record player listening to the compositions of how they did the orchestral arrangements for the music of Peter and the Wolf. The Nutcracker, the ballet The Nutcracker. These are things, I mean, we're talking when I'm 9 years old or something. Of course, White Man in Hammersmith Palais. That for me was, that's it for London. White Man in Hammersmith Palais and The Clash. Actually, Big Audio Dynamite as well. The Globe and E = MC squared and all of that stuff. Although it was happening at the same time as Transvision Vamp, it was just such an exciting time. So that's a soundtrack. Supertramp, Breakfast in America. When I was living in New York and recording, I Came Here to Blow Minds. I mixed some of it in Brooklyn, and I would drive home across the Brooklyn Bridge. And it's so silly, but each time I got to the base of the Brooklyn Bridge, I would put on, because we had iPod by then, right? It was more than an iPhone, it was an iPod. Breakfast in America, Take a Look at My Boyfriend, and Supertramp, because you're driving and you can see the Manhattan skyline. Just silly, silly stuff that makes you feel invincible. Oh, I've got another one. Coming home from doing Racine #1, which I recorded in New Jersey. I'd come home on the PATH train, which is the New Jersey Underground, back into Manhattan, listening to Eminem and Jay-Z's The Black Album. I've walked the length of Broadway. I've walked the length of Broadway from Chinatown all the way up to Midtown, just listening to The Black Album. Thinking I was a fucking hip-hop artist with all the gesticulators. 3 a.m, safe as houses. Don't let anyone tell you New York's not safe. Especially if you're a nutter with a Walkman at 3 a.m. and you're doing all the hand movements. It's crazy. So they steer clear. So many, music. Yeah, just so many moments.
Last question. If you could go back and relive one musical moment from your career, what would it be?
There was a gig. There was a gig Transvision Vamp did at an arena in Paris called Bercy, which is spelled Bercy. And it was and we were kind of massive by then. And my radio mic broke 3 times in a row. 3 different microphones were brought on stage for me. And each time the radio mic went bust, the crowd got more and more manic, screaming, "No, no." I would just like to get back on that stage and relive it exactly as it was and just enjoy it all over again, because it was just so exciting. They talk about surfing when you're surfing the wave, cresting the wave, and you just fucking catch that wave. And at that time for Transvision Vamp, everything was going right. Everything. We were well rehearsed. We had hit records. We were famous. We were, the fucking machinery of the organization was organized. So you'd have gig after gig after gig and a huge team, like anything that's successful. And you'd step out on stage, whichever country you were in, and everyone just knew every single word and was so excited to see the gig of the year. And so I'd go and do that Bercy gig again. It was just so exciting. Each time the microphone went down, made it even more exciting. I'd do that again.
Is there anything you'd like to mention before we wrap up? Anything else coming up in the immediate future? And if you want to tell people exactly where they can get the album?
Please, yes. Well, it's 16 dates all around the UK. And my deluxe versions are only, as you know, available through my web store, thewendyjames.com/store. And then you get fold out posters, you get all the lyrics, you get my handwritten liner notes. The vinyl package is a 12-inch and a 10-inch. So you get 2 vinyls within one. Once again, you know, I've given everything. I mean, in all humility, I do give everything. I'll be this time in a month's time when the tour is over on November the 7th. So on November the 8th, I'm just going to be a quivering mess on the floor, having just given everything I can possibly give. 3rd album running. Thank you, Mark.
Not a problem. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, Wendy, you know, and I really do love the album. I've loved all the last 3 we've spoke about, you know, 100%. So that's why I wanted to get you on, you know.
Yeah, I'm really, really grateful. And I'm so lucky with the musicians and the engineers that I work with. It's taken a while, but I really do have a team around me that bring out the best in me. It's quite an accomplishment.
No, well, I wish you all the best with it and with the album and the shows. And I look forward to down the line to seeing you over in Ireland.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Won't that be a good day when finally I do get there and we meet?